It really is a stubborn thing. Hanli stared at the corpse fiend that had reappeared after the lightning faded, his brows knitting tightly together. This thing before him possessed little intelligence, yet the toughness of its body rivaled that of a true Tai Jade immortal. The lightning sacrificing technique from before had left it covered in wounds from head to toe, but it had still fallen far short of destroying it. And in his current situation he could not afford to drag things out for long. Just as Hanli was weighing whether to use the green bamboo bee cloud sword that had been nurtured the longest inside the mysterious heaven gourd, or summon the essence flame firebird to burn and refine the creature, Mo Guang's voice suddenly rang out over the lake of his mind. Fellow Taoist Han, though this thing is a fiend ghostly creature, its cultivation realm is not low, so it has a fair amount of resistance to lightning arts and flame. If you want to clean it up, you'll need to spend quite a bit of effort. Why not leave it to me? You have a way to kill it? Hanli asked. This creature was formed when a soul entered a corpse and failed to disperse, drawing in baleful qi until it condensed into this form. I happen to know its fatal weakness, and I also have a proper method to deal with it. As long as fellow Taoist Han agrees, I can destroy it in no time at all, Mo Guang replied. Hearing that, Hanli considered for a moment before the tips of his right index and middle fingers lit up with a faint glow, and a flower-shaped mark surfaced there. A silver gate of light about a zhang tall opened in the empty air beside him. At the same time Hanli made a gesture with his left hand, and the true words treasure will spun once before rapidly shrinking and flying into his sleeve, vanishing from sight. Freed from the restraint of the power of time law, the Tai corpse fiend immediately regained its mobility, yet it maintained its original diving posture, shooting straight toward Hanli's glabella. A soft whoosh sounded. A black figure flashed out from the silver gate of light. In a blur, it arrived before the corpse fiend, and one hand formed from baleful qi shot forward. Dark red patterns coiled over the palm as it pierced straight through the spot where the fiend's chest and abdomen met. That black figure was naturally none other than Mo Guang, who had already fused with the gray immortal corpse. At that moment, in the hand that had pierced the corpse fiend's body, he was clutching a fist-sized chunk of black flesh. The lump resembled a heart, yet it had 7 apertures. An incomparably dense baleful qi surged out of it in rolling waves, and with each contraction and expansion, it seemed almost to breathe and pulse. The corpse fiend's true fatal point is not its dantian, nor its head, nor its heart. It lies in this thing called the baleful fetus. It relies on this object to gather baleful qi and transform the corpse into a fiend. But precisely because of that, this vital point may resist blades, spears, swords, and halberds, yet it cannot withstand an assault of baleful qi, Mo Guang explained as he slowly withdrew his hand. As soon as he finished speaking, the corpse fiend's mangled remains collapsed like flowing sand, turning into countless purple-black grains that scattered across the ground before crumbling into black dust and dissipating. Fellow Taoist Han, this baleful fetus, Mo Guang said, glancing toward Hanli with a questioning look. Since it was fellow Taoist Mo Guang who personally slew the corpse fiend, then naturally this baleful fetus belongs to you, Hanli said with a nod. Then many thanks. After offering his thanks, Mo Guang clenched his hand and crushed the baleful fetus into powder. Purple light swirled within it, revealing a crystal bead the size of a longan. Before Hanli could get a clear look at it, Mo Guang casually tossed it into his mouth. Fellow Taoist Han, if there is nothing else, I shall return for now and continue my secluded cultivation, Mo Guang said. You have my thanks, Hanli replied with a nod. Mo Guang turned and stepped back through the silver gate of light, returning to the cushion inside the main hall and seating himself cross-legged. Hanli bent his fingers slightly, and the silver gate gradually contracted before vanishing. As he watched Mo Guang disappear, Hanli's gaze slowly darkened. He flipped a pill into his hand, swallowed it, and after remaining where he stood to regulate his breathing for a moment, continued deeper into the palace. When he arrived before the staircase leading to the 3rd level of the palace, Hanli did not immediately ascend. Instead, he released his spiritual sense and swept it back toward the entrance. The burly man carrying the broadsword on his back had entered the 2nd passageway earlier, so he should also have come into this palace. Yet all the way here, Hanli had neither encountered him nor found any trace he had left behind. That was truly strange. Could it be that he had not entered this place after all? After observing for a while and finding nothing unusual, Hanli finally continued upward step by step. The moment he entered through the third-floor entrance, he saw an old screen set not far ahead. The landscape painting on it had faded so badly that its original appearance was no longer discernible, leaving only a rough outline behind. The tattered cloth was riddled with crisscrossing tears. Even the frame itself was marked with sword scars and cracks of varying depth. That it could still stand upright without collapsing was practically a miracle. After Hanli took one step forward, his brows twitched almost imperceptibly. His movement paused slightly, but his expression soon returned to normal, and he continued inward. As he came close to the screen, he peered through one of the tiers and saw several antique display racks arranged unevenly inside the hall. Various flower vases, bird-shaped vessels, fish jars, and some dark greenish-black books rested upon them. At first glance it seemed to be a study, yet once he walked around the screen, he discovered that there were nearly 100 such display racks. Most of them, however, had already been utterly smashed. The few he had glimpsed through the screen were merely the ones still standing. Hanli walked slowly through the ruins of the collapsed racks, and picked up one relatively intact green ancient book. Taking a closer look, he found 3 ancient seal script characters on the cover. Record of Metal and Stone. When he opened it, however, he found it to be merely a book on the study and collection of bronzeware and stone inscriptions, not a cultivation manual or secret scripture of any kind. After that, he picked up several more books in succession, only to discover that they were all ordinary miscellaneous texts from various categories. It seems this place should have been someone's living quarters. Judging by these books, it must have belonged to a rather interesting person with broad tastes. Hanli murmured to himself as he continued onward. Passing through layer after layer of palace doors, Hanli eventually arrived at the deepest part of the 3rd level. The instant he stepped across the threshold, he felt as though he had entered some kind of barrier. A powerful force of time law immediately rushed toward him. His gaze sharpened as he looked inside. In the center of the great hall, shimmering with watery light, was a blue pool some 20 to 30 zhang across. Ripples glimmered upon its surface, and it looked astonishingly clear and limpid. Hanli's heart tightened, and the words water of time instinctively surfaced in his mind. The power of time law was actually this dense? Could the blue liquid filling that small pool truly be water of time? With a stir of thought, Hanli probed the blue pool carefully with his spiritual sense for a while, and his brows gradually furrowed. He discovered that aside from the fluctuations of time law, the pool also contained an incomparably vigorous aura of life. He took several steps forward and looked into the pool. Only then did he notice that, in the place his line of sight had previously been blocked, there was a corpse floating inside. "It's actually him?" Hanli blurted in surprise after seeing the appearance of the corpse clearly. The corpse was no more than 5 feet tall. Its body was withered and skinny, but its head was grotesquely oversized, giving it an extremely disproportionate appearance, as though it might topple headfirst into the water at any moment. Yet it showed no sign of instability. Instead, it lay calmly on the water's surface with its eyes half closed and its expression tranquil, as if it were merely asleep. This strange alien with the appearance of a big-headed child was exactly the same as the statue Hanli had seen at the gate of Waterborne Palace. Hanli had never expected to encounter it again here, and in such a state. The corpse of the big-headed child was perfectly preserved. There seemed to be no injuries at all on its surface, yet there was no fluctuation of aura from it. It looked as though it had only just died not long ago, utterly unlike the rotting corpses and white bones Hanli had seen earlier. A faint flicker passed through Hanli's eyes as his gaze slowly shifted away from the child's face and settled on the surface of the water beside it. There he saw a blue shield about 2 feet square floating on the water, engraved with intricate patterns and shining with crystalline brilliance. And not even 3 inches away from the shield floated a blue crystal flute, pierced with a neat row of rounded holes, with 7 or 8 tassels made of bamboo leaves hanging from one end. It looked exquisitely crafted. These 2 objects were suffused with spirituality, and showed not the slightest sign of having weakened with the passage of time. Both also radiated intense waves of time law aura, making it obvious that they were immortal treasures of no low grade, imbued with the power of time law. Naturally, Hanli felt more than a little tempted by the pair. Yet he did not rashly make a move. Instead, he shifted slightly to one side, a purple glint flashing through his eyes, and cast a covert glance toward a round stone pillar in the northwestern corner of the hall. The burly man named Ran Hao, the one with the broad sword on his back, had somehow used a treasure to merge his body completely with the watery blue stone pillar. Even his aura had been all but entirely concealed. Han Li's spirit refinement technique had already made some progress in its fifth layer, making his spiritual perception keener than before. Thus, from the moment he had stepped onto the third floor of the palace, he had already sensed fluctuations of Ran Hao's aura, though he had been unable to determine the exact location. At the same time, he knew that the other party had also already discovered his presence. In order not to startle the snake, he had pretended to notice nothing and had searched the entire third-floor palace in full view. At that moment, Han Li's brows suddenly twitched, and his figure blurred before vanishing from the spot. An instant later, he appeared atop a crossbeam near the ceiling of the palace. His aura abruptly drew inward, and even the fluctuations of his spiritual sense vanished completely. It was as though he had suddenly evaporated from the mortal world. Not long after he concealed himself, a vivid scarlet figure emerged at the staircase entrance to the third level. It was Feng Qingyuan. His face was slightly pale, and his expression looked somewhat tense as he walked slowly this way. When he passed through the fallen display racks, he too, like Han Li, examined the books scattered everywhere. Upon discovering that they were not immortal scriptures or secret manuals, he casually tossed them aside. Afterward, the tension on his face eased somewhat, though his pace grew even slower. His movements appeared casual, but in truth he had not lowered his guard in the least. His eyes were covertly sweeping the surroundings the entire time, and his spiritual sense had already spread over the entire hall. Yet compared with his spiritual sense, the concealment methods of Han Li and Ran Hao were clearly superior. Once he found nothing unusual, Feng Qingyuan suddenly sped up. In a blur, he arrived before the pool at the deepest part of the hall, and immediately spotted the blue shield and blue flute. His brows knit tightly, and greed was laid bare in his eyes. Yet like Han Li, he did not dare act rashly. Earlier, he had seen that burly man enter this passageway. He had tracked him all the way here and had even found obvious traces of battle on the second floor of the hall. Yet the third floor was completely empty. That was clearly abnormal. Fellow Taoist Ren, I have already discovered where you are hiding. Why not come out and meet me? Let us scheme together for the treasures in this pool. Feng Qingyuan suddenly said aloud, his gaze narrowing. Upon hearing that, Han Li instinctively looked toward the stone pillar in the northwestern corner. The burly man remained hidden as tightly as before, showing no intention whatsoever of revealing himself. Han Li immediately knew that Feng Qingyuan was simply bluffing. Silence filled the hall. Only Feng Qingyuan's voice echoed faintly through it before gradually fading away. Seeing that his probe had failed to flush anyone out, his brows furrowed even more deeply, and an odd light flickered in the depths of his eyes. After a long while, he still failed to suppress the greed surging within him. With a wave of one hand, a flash of golden light appeared, summoning an 8-armed golden armored puppet beside him. With the other hand, he activated an incantation, commanding the puppet to bend down and fish those 2 immortal treasures out of the pool. The puppet sprang forward with nimble grace, skimming over the surface of the pool like a spider. 2 of its arms reached out with the light touch of dragonflies skimming water, descending toward the blue flute and blue shield. Han Li's brows drew together tightly as his eyes fixed on the golden armored puppet. He was simply waiting for it to succeed, so that he could seize the 2 immortal treasures from its hands with thunderous speed. The puppet's hands had already touched the 2 treasures. Just as it seemed about to succeed, the mirror-smooth surface of the pool suddenly rippled violently. A water-blue figure shot out from beneath the surface, transforming into a streak of rushing light that tore through the air and carried the golden armored puppet flying out of the pool. A metallic crash rang out. The puppet's body, utterly unable to resist, was hurled heavily onto the bank of the pool. Immediately afterward, a large blue foot with webbed toes slammed down onto its chest with a bang, crushing inward the core of the golden armored puppet, which had been forged from rare refined gold and whose strength was comparable to a late-stage true immortal cultivator. All of this happened in the span of a spark. Feng Qingyuan, seeing things go badly, had already leapt backward more than 100 zhang. In his hand there now appeared a bright red oil paper umbrella, spinning rapidly as he stared in full alert toward the other side. The owner of that foot standing on the puppet's chest was astonishingly a blue merman with the head of a fish and the body of a human, its entire body covered in crystal-like scales. Its aura could not be discerned, but it radiated wave after wave of time law fluctuations so intense that they made one's heart tremble. Just by looking at it, Feng Qingyuan had already begun to regret his actions. The corner of his eye darted toward the staircase behind him, and thoughts raced through his mind as he searched frantically for a means of escape. Yet that single small movement was enough. The blue merman suddenly opened its mouth, revealing 2 rows of dense, sharp teeth, and let out a silent, vicious roar. Then with a pop, its form burst apart into a cloud of blue mist, which surged toward Feng Qingyuan like morning fog driven by mountain wind. Sensing danger, Feng Qingyuan snapped open the red oil paper umbrella in his hand. As it spun, strands of blood-colored light poured out from it and enveloped him, turning his whole body into a mass of crimson radiance that shot toward the staircase in a flash. Yet the blue mist clung to him like a shadow. In an instant it arrived at the staircase, caught up with Feng Qingyuan beneath the red light of the umbrella, and engulfed him completely. A muffled, hoarse cry, as if forced out from the depths of a throat, came from within the blue fog. Then came the sound of something heavy collapsing to the floor, and the third level of the great hall once again returned to silence. A moment later, all the blue mist rolled backward, gathering again into the form of the blue merman. With a leap, it splashed up a spray of blue droplets and plunged back into the pool. Throughout the entire process, it never so much as glanced at the blue shield and flute that had apparently been left there as bait. And on the ground by the staircase, all that remained was a withered black-brown corpse, shriveled completely dry, and a tattered old oil paper umbrella with its spirituality entirely gone. Crouched on the ceiling beam, Han Li had seen everything clearly, and his astonishment deepened all the more. What exactly was this creature that had suddenly appeared? How could it kill a golden immortal in the blink of an eye? Just then, a purple figure appeared soundlessly at the entrance to the third level. It was Feng Lin. Han Li's pupils contracted slightly, and he silently began to recite an incantation, drawing his hidden form in even tighter. Feng Lin walked over at an unhurried pace. After looking at Feng Qingyuan's corpse and then casting a glance toward the blue pool, her expression remained calm, as if she was not surprised at all. Could it be that the two of you want me to go test that merman's abilities again? Unfortunately, I am not Yuan Feng. You needn't hide any longer. Come out, she said coolly, looking first toward one spot, then toward Han Li's hiding place. At that moment, a layer of purple light emerged in Feng Lin's eyes. Countless purple points flickered within them like a resplendent galaxy being born and extinguished in the night sky. Han Li was startled. Her eyes had also cultivated the 9 nether demon pupils, and from the look of it, her mastery seemed even greater than his. Moreover, Feng Lin's entire bearing had changed. Gone was the gentle, seductive softness she had shown before. Now her expression was as cold as ice, and she carried herself like an empress standing high above all others. Han Li's thoughts turned rapidly. He no longer continued hiding and slowly stepped out from his concealed position. Almost at the same moment, a blur flickered elsewhere, and Ren Hao also revealed himself. Fellow Taoist Feng, you flatter me. How would I dare? That Yuan Feng looked clever enough, but in truth he was a complete fool. He couldn't even recognize the danger here. He simply wasn't worthy of joining forces with the three of us, so his death was no more than what he deserved. As for fellow Taoist Li and fellow Taoist Feng, your cultivation is deep indeed. I admire you both greatly, Ren Hao said with a loud laugh. Han Li looked at Ren Hao expressionlessly and said nothing. Spare me that. Let's not talk around the issue. The treasure is right in front of us. We join forces and kill that blue merman. As for the treasures here, each of us can compete according to our own ability. What do you say? Feng Lin snorted, ignoring Ren Hao's flattery and speaking bluntly. No problem. That monster may have some skill, but how could it withstand the three of us joining hands? Ren Hao immediately nodded and agreed loudly. Han Li still stood there without speaking. What, does fellow Taoistly disagree? Or do you perhaps have a better idea? Feng Lin asked slowly as she looked toward him. Joining forces is no issue. It is only that my experience is shallow, far less than the breadth of knowledge the two of you possess. Before we proceed, I would like to ask whether either of you can enlighten me as to the origin of that blue merman, Hanli said calmly after stroking his chin. The blue merman's aura was strange, completely unlike that of ordinary cultivators. It seemed more like some kind of existence condensed out of spiritual power. You overpraise me, fellow Taoistly. The truth is, I am not very clear on what that blue merman is either, Feng Lin said, shaking her head. Ren Hao glanced at Feng Lin, then also shook his head to indicate that he did not know. Hanli felt a trace of disappointment. Since all three had agreed to join forces, they wasted no more time. After discussing tactics through voice transmission, they attacked the blue pool from 3 different directions. Ren Hao moved the fastest. In a single flash he was already near the pool, one hand darting out from his sleeve like lightning as it flipped and grabbed. With a tearing sound, blue light flashed above the pool, and a gigantic blue beast claw the size of a house appeared. It was covered in scales and blazing with tens of thousands of strands of blue light, exuding an astonishing might as it seized toward the blue shield within the pool. The water in the blue pool rolled upward, and the blue merman emerged once again. With a wave of its delicate hand, a blue staff shadow appeared. The shadow of the staff looked ancient and profound, bearing an aura of primordial desolation, like the scepter of some ancient god of water, and it struck the blue beast claw. A tremendous muffled boom rang out. The seemingly mighty blue claw shattered with a single strike, turning into a great expanse of watery light that scattered away. Ren Hao's eyes flickered, but he did not look surprised. He pointed with an incantation. The gigantic blue sword on his back immediately transformed into a blue rainbow and soared into the air. After spinning once overhead, it erupted with blue light and swelled wildly. In the span of a breath, a massive blue sword more than 100 zhang long appeared above Ren Hao's head, then came crashing down toward the blue merman. The sound of surging waves rose from the surrounding void, and a heavy moisture flooded the air, making the atmosphere suddenly incomparably oppressive. At the same time, Feng Lin also launched her attack. With a flick of her hand, a streak of black light shot out and swelled in the wind into an enormous black gate. The gate stood more than 10 zhang tall and 2 or 3 zhang wide. Red-brown blotches stained its surface, as though they were bloodstains, and 2 purple-black rings hung from it, clanging softly. On either side of the gate were relief carvings of ferocious demonic gods with green faces, fangs and blood-red eyes. Boundless demonic chi poured from the black gate, enough to make anyone tremble at the sight of it. Feng Lin muttered an incantation and spat out a mouthful of essence blood, which turned into a cloud of blood mist and merged into the black gate. The 2 ghostly faces carved on the gate blazed with red light in their eyes. Their mouths opened simultaneously, spitting out 2 blood-red beams that transformed into giant crimson hands and seized the 2 purple-black gate rings, wrenching them violently. The black gate trembled with a humming vibration and slowly opened. The sky-piercing howls of evil ghosts poured from within. Then a thick black pillar of light gushed out and shot toward the blue merman. Within the tumbling black radiance, one grotesque face after another condensed forth, human faces and beast faces alike, wailing with shrill screams. An immeasurable sense of suffering emanated from the black beam. It was impossible to tell what kind of divine ability it was. By now, Hanli had also reached the edge of the pool. Feeling the aura of the black pillar, discomfort surged through his mind, and he hastily circulated the spirit refinement technique before recovering. He cast Feng Lin a deep glance, then formed a sword incantation with one hand. 3 small green swords shot from his sleeve. With a flash of sword light, they grew into 3 giant green swords, their surfaces dancing with thick golden arcs of lightning and rumbling with thunderous peals. Han Li's gaze flickered as he rapidly chanted, then swept his sleeve. The 3 green giant swords shot forth at once, forming a triangular formation as they slashed toward the blue merman. Golden lightning coiled around their blades, bursting with vast golden radiance. Faced with the combined assault of the 3 of them, fast as thunder and violent as a storm, the blue merman's face turned even more savage. It swung its blue staff fiercely, and a harsh whistling filled the air as countless blue staff shadows flickered into existence around its body, condensing into a thick curtain of staff light that collided with the attacks of the three cultivators. Whether Han Li and the others had truly used their full strength was unknown, but their offensive was like a raging storm, wave upon wave without pause. Even an ordinary early-stage Tai cultivator would likely have found it impossible to resist. A chain of earth-shaking explosions roared out. Though the blue staff shadows looked unbreakable, they were still smashed apart one after another. The curtain of staff light rapidly thinned until it finally collapsed altogether. The blue staff in the merman's hand also shattered in a flash. But immediately afterward, blue light flashed in its other hand, and there appeared a similarly ancient blue fishing rod, from which hung a fine blue fishing line as thin as a hair. The merman flicked the fishing rod, and the line immediately whipped into motion, leaping and dancing around its body with incredible speed. Wherever the fishing line passed, waves of blue light erupted out of the void itself, and the surrounding space twisted into rapidly spinning blue vortices. Han Li's three green bamboo becloud swords crashed into those blue vortices, releasing sweeping sheets of golden lightning, but the moment they touched the vortices, the lightning vanished without a trace, as though swallowed by the sea. The vortices merely quivered slightly before returning to normal. Han Li felt as though his three giant swords had struck an immeasurable ocean, and the world-cleaving might they contained had been swallowed up by endless waters before being completely dissolved. Almost at the same time, the giant blue sword wielded by Ran Hao came crashing down with overwhelming force onto the blue vortices, only to be blocked just as completely. All of its sword light and power were swallowed up, achieving nothing. On the other side, although the black pillar of light fired from Feng Lin's great gate was also blocked by the blue vortices, she seemed to have anticipated this. Her hands rapidly formed incantations. With a hum, silver spirit patterns emerged across the surface of the black gate. Countless silver runes gushed forth and merged into the black beam of light. The black beam immediately began to glimmer with streaks of silver, becoming semi-transparent. With a soft tearing sound, the black beam, though with some difficulty, pierced through the blue vortices and engulfed the blue merman. Bathed in the black pillar, the blue merman showed a pained expression, and its movements seemed to become somewhat sluggish. Feng Lin abruptly changed her hand seals, and the black pillar quivered. Then with a sharp whoosh, an enormous figure wrapped in demonic qi leapt out from within it. This fiend had a green face and savage fangs. It stood around 10 zhang tall, with two blood-red curved horns growing from its head of crimson hair. Its limbs were covered in scales, and in its hands it held a jet-black steel fork that pulsed ceaselessly with black light. Though not especially huge in stature, the creature exuded a boundless and vicious aura that instantly filled the entire hall. The sinister cackling laugh from its mouth was enough to make even Han Li and Ran Hao's spirits shudder. This is one of the 13 demon kings of the extraterritorial heavenly devils, the king of Savi. Be careful, fellow Taoist Han. Unlike ordinary extraterritorial heavenly devils, which injure people through inner demon illusions, this one can directly wound the soul. It is extremely difficult to deal with. Mo Guang's shocked voice rang out in Han Li's mind. Hearing this, Han Li's heart tightened slightly. Go! With a low shout, Feng Lin urged it on with an incantation. Black light erupted from the steel fork in the King of Savi's hand as it stabbed savagely into the blue merman, which was still slowed by the black pillar. With a muffled bang, the blue merman's body suddenly exploded, scattering into a cloud of blue mist. Seeing this, Feng Lin's face lit up with joy, and she changed her incantation. A strand of black qi split off from the black beam like a great black hand and scooped toward the two treasures in the pool. Ran Hao's face tightened in alarm when he saw this, but the blue vortices had not disappeared, so he could only watch helplessly. Han Li's eyes flickered when he saw the scene, but he did nothing. Just as the two treasures were about to be swept up by the black qi, a sudden change occurred. The blue mist that the merman had turned into abruptly condensed, and in a flash the blue merman's figure reappeared, looking utterly unharmed. The merman grinned. With a swing of its blue fishing rod, a streak of blue flashed by. With a bang, the black qi exploded apart. How is that possible? Feng Lin cried out, disbelief filling her eyes. This gate of Savi was a natal immortal treasure whose refining method she had obtained by chance from a relic in the demon domain in her early years. She had expended innumerable efforts to refine it. For the sake of this treasure, Feng Lin had all but emptied the savings of the first half of her life. Yet its power had never made her regret that sacrifice. The Savi demonic light alone was enough to injure the souls of cultivators of the same rank, while the manifested king of Savi could wound even Tai beings. And yet, after being struck simultaneously by both the Savi demonic light and the king of Savi itself, the blue merman remained as if nothing had happened. At that very moment, the merman swung its arm again. The blue fishing line whipped out once more and instantly wove itself into a blue fishing net that covered Feng Lin's gate of Savi in one sweep. Because she had been momentarily distracted by shock, her natal immortal treasure was caught and bound. Her expression changed immediately, and her hands flew through incantations like spinning wheels. A storm of wind roared. Black light blazed from the gate of Savi as it trembled violently, trying to break free of the blue fishing net. But no matter how it struggled, the net only tightened further, dragging the gate downward as if hauling in a massive fish and pulling it swiftly toward the pool below. At the same time, two more blue fishing lines shot out from the rod with twin popping sounds, whipping toward Han Li's three green bamboo bee cloud swords and Run Hao's blue giant sword. Having already witnessed the power of the blue fishing line, Han Li hurriedly formed a hand seal and pointed. Golden lightning burst from the surfaces of the three green bamboo bee cloud swords, and they shot backward with incredible speed, narrowly avoiding entanglement. On the other side, Ran Hao also hastily recalled his blue giant sword, barely dodging the other fishing line. The two men exchanged a glance and both saw the shock in the other's eyes. This blue merman was actually so formidable that even while facing the three of them together, it could still gain the upper hand. Han Li's eyes flickered as he considered whether he should use the power of time law. Otherwise, defeating the blue merman seemed almost impossible. Just then a tremendous boom suddenly rang out from Feng Lin's side. Black light burst from her body, then spread rapidly outward as a wave of darkness, instantly forming a black spirit domain that covered the entire hall. Countless black demonic shadows flickered within the spirit domain, each one releasing agonized shrieks so harrowing they made the scalp crawl. The moment the black spirit domain expanded, the gate of Savi seemed to resonate with it. The black light it radiated multiplied several-fold, and the two demonic god carvings upon it seemed almost to come alive, twisting and roaring. A violently overwhelming force erupted from the gate of Savi, causing the surrounding void to tremble as it abruptly stopped being dragged downward. Under the suppression of the black spirit domain, the layer of blue vortices around the merman dimmed noticeably. Ren Hao's eyes lit up when he saw this, and his hands formed a rapid series of seals before his chest. A thunderous rumble sounded. Blue light flared from his body and spread outward in great waves, instantly forming his own spirit domain. Countless blue waters churned within it, booming like an ocean in full rage. The light of the blue vortices around the merman dimmed again. "Fellow Taoist Li!" Ren Hao shouted toward Han Li, the meaning obvious. Han Li's gaze flickered, but he still formed hand seals. Golden light erupted around him, and countless golden runes tumbled within it. With a sweep of his sleeve, the golden runes spread out with a crash, forming a time spirit domain. "This is a spirit domain of time law." Ren Hao and Feng Lin both showed stunned expressions as they sensed the power of time law within Han Li's domain. Among the 3,000 great laws of the world, each contained the profound mysteries governing the operation and life of all things. To comprehend even the smallest fraction of their transformations was immensely difficult, and often required tens of thousands of years, for even the slightest chance of partial mastery. And time law as one of the three supreme laws was even more elusive. To say nothing of understanding it deeply, even grasping the threshold of it was already unimaginably difficult. Yet Han Li, a golden immortal cultivator whose realm was no higher than theirs, had not only cultivated time law but had also formed a spirit domain from it. Judging from the power he could command, his comprehension of time law was clearly not shallow. How could the two of them not be astonished? Once the blue merman was enveloped by Han Li's time spirit domain, its movements faltered, and the blue vortices around it dimmed sharply again, becoming faint and unstable. At that very moment, a fierce light flashed through Han Li's eyes. He suddenly formed a sword incantation with one hand, and green light flashed repeatedly as 9 green bamboo cloud swords streamed out from his sleeve in succession. With a spin they transformed into 9 giant green swords. Slash! With a sharp gesture, he brought them all crashing down at once toward the blue vortices. Renhao had already come back to his senses by then. With a loud shout, the giant blue sword beside him shot out, blazing with sky-reaching blue radiance. He chanted rapidly, and the illusory blue waves within his spirit domain surged toward the giant sword infused into it. The blue sword boomed and trembled violently, its blue light intensifying once more. After a single violent quiver, it vanished, only to reappear in the next instant above the blue vortices, now transformed into a heaven-supporting colossal blade hundreds of zhang long. Then it came crashing down together with Han Li's 9 green swords. Though Feng Lin's natal immortal treasure was still trapped, she gritted her teeth and swept her sleeve. A black seal the size of a fist shot out, glittering with black crystalline light, within which a shadowy black tiger could be seen. She muttered an incantation and pressed one hand toward the black seal through the air. A world-shaking tiger's roar instantly erupted from it. The black tiger shadow circled around the seal, then suddenly inhaled deeply, drawing all the many black shadows from her spirit domain into itself in a rolling torrent. The black seal rapidly expanded. In the blink of an eye, it had become the size of a house, radiating tangible black light as it smashed viciously toward the blue vortices. At last, a flicker of emotion crossed the blue merfolk's face. It swept its blue fishing rod through the air, as though preparing one final move. But beneath Han Li's temporal domain, its motions had become unbearably slow. Before it could react, the attacks from Han Li and the other two had already smashed into the blue vortices. A heaven-shaking boom rang out. Blazing multicolored light shot into the sky, so brilliant that it was nearly impossible to keep one's eyes open. The blue vortices shuddered violently. Cracks appeared across their surfaces, spreading at astonishing speed, and then they collapsed with a crash, revealing the blue merfolk behind them. Die! A fierce light flashed through Feng Lin's eyes as he thrust a palm downward through the air. The black seal immediately flared with even denser black radiance. Amid peals of wind and thunder, it came crashing down once more toward the blue merfolk. Renhao also gave a sharp shout and swept out one arm. The blue greatsword shot downward, releasing a terrifying sword howl as it cleaved toward the blue merfolk. For the first time, panic showed on the merfolk's face. It opened its mouth and spat out a dense cloud of blue mist to meet the black seal and the blue greatsword, then turned and fled toward the pool below. At the same time, blue light flashed wildly over its body, and the power of the time laws within it surged. Its sluggish body suddenly grew agile again. "You're not getting away." Han Li narrowed his eyes and flipped a hand, producing the golden little lock. He spat out a streak of golden light, which vanished into the lock in a flash. The lock immediately blazed with dazzling radiance, transformed into a mass of golden light, and with a flicker disappeared into the temporal domain. The next instant golden light flashed beside the blue merfolk, and a giant golden lock appeared out of nowhere. A soft click sounded as the golden lock snapped shut around one of the merfolk's arms. Dazzling golden light poured from the lock, then condensed into a huge character for lock, which enveloped the merfolk's entire body. With the power of his domain driving the golden lock, Han Li made the glowing symbol several times larger than before. It not only sealed the merfolk in place, but also trapped most of the blue mist it had spewed out. The mist froze in midair at once as if turned to ice. The next moment the black seal and the blue greatsword descended, punching through what remained of the blue mist and striking the merfolk at the same time. With a muffled bang the blue merfolk's body exploded, turning into a spray of blue liquid that splashed everywhere. A fair amount of the liquid splattered onto the 3 immortal treasures, making sharp hissing sounds. The black seal, the blue greatsword, and the golden lock all began to flicker wildly, their spiritual light dimming at a visible rate, as if they were being heavily corroded. At the sight Renhao's heart ached. He hastily formed a hand seal and recalled the blue greatsword to inspect it. At that very moment 2 shrill whistles rang out from the side. Han Li and Feng Lin paid no attention at all to their damaged treasures. They shot forward at once, lunging toward the blue pool. Renhao reacted immediately with a furious shout and gave chase like a bolt of lightning, but he had been a moment too slow. Han Li and Feng Lin had already arrived above the pool. Feng Lin waved a hand and released a stream of black light that wrapped around the blue jade flute. Han Li's gaze flickered. He thrust out a hand, sending forth a stream of azure light that transformed into a large azure hand, seized the other blue shield, and drew it into his grasp. The thing felt cool to the touch. It was soft in his hand, yet also resilient. It was not a hard shield at all, but a flexible one. A trace of delight appeared in his eyes, and he was just about to put it away. Then, from the corner of his eye, he suddenly saw space beside him ripple faintly. A crimson bead had appeared out of nowhere. Han Li's expression changed, and golden light erupted from his body. But before it could fully bloom, a thunderous explosion rang out. The crimson bead detonated, transforming into a blazing crimson sun dozens of feet wide that swallowed Han Li's figure whole. Within that crimson sun, white flames appeared, wildly interweaving and flashing, radiating an appalling heat. The nearby void gave a low hum and melted open into holes. The temporal domain that had enveloped the hall vanished at once, and the flow of time inside the hall returned to normal. A violent torrent of air surged outward, becoming a savage hurricane that swept in all directions. The great hall shook violently several times, but it did not collapse. No one knew what material this hall had been built from. It had endured repeated clashes of such ferocity and still seemed wholly unscathed. A ball of blue light tumbled through the air. It was the blue shield. Ren Hao's figure blurred. He appeared beside it in an instant, grabbed it, and a look of delight spread across his face. Ren Hao, what are you doing? Feng Lin had dodged in time and was not caught in the blast of the crimson sun. Landing on the first level of the hall, he shouted coldly. The black seal and the gate of Swopo flew back and circled above his head. With the blue fish creature dead, the blue threads of light that had bound the gate of Swopo had also vanished. What am I doing? Isn't it obvious? I'm taking the treasure. Ren Hao sneered. He spat out a mass of blue light that wrapped around the blue shield in his hand and drew it into his body. That was a 9 annihilation flow flame pearl. Even a Tai cultivator is said to be killable in one strike by such a treasure. I never thought you'd have something like that on you. It seems I underestimated you earlier. The coldness in Feng Lin's eyes deepened as he glanced at the still blazing crimson sun. Han Li had taken the blast head-on. Most likely his chances were grim. Ren Hao chuckled darkly. We came into the True Word Gate ruins hunting treasure. How could I not bring a few trump cards? I imagine fellow Taoist Feng has such items too. You just haven't had reason to use them yet. We agreed to join forces against that blue merfolk and seize treasure according to our own ability. Yet you ignored all honor and ambushed an ally. So the members of the Yipao Society really are all this kind of trash. Feng Lin's voice was icy. Ren Hao smiled with contempt. Treasure hunting has always been like this. Traveling alongside a cultivator of the same rank, who can wield the power of the time laws, is hardly reassuring. Only if that person disappears forever can the two of us rest easy. Wouldn't you agree? Besides, since he fell for it, that only means he was inferior to me. If he had truly been stronger, then he could have taken everything I had instead. Is that so? Then that makes things much simpler. A cold snort sounded from within the crimson sun. It was Han Li's voice. Ren Hao and Feng Lin both changed expression at once. Ren Hao's heart in particular dropped hard. A figure walked slowly out from within the crimson sun. It was Han Li. He was completely unharmed. Even his robes had not been damaged in the slightest. A golden wheel had appeared behind him, turning gently, while golden ripples spread through the space within several feet of his body. Wherever Han Li passed, the flames that radiated such terrifying heat froze in place as though time itself had stopped for them. Only after he moved on did they return to normal. You! Ren Hao stared at Han Li in utter disbelief, then abruptly spun around and shot toward the entrance of the hall in a streak of blue. Han Li let out a cold laugh. His hands formed seals and golden light exploded around him as his temporal domain expanded in an instant, covering a radius of 100 li. Ren Hao's fleeing figure immediately slowed, becoming more than 10 times more sluggish. At the same time, a flash of golden lightning appeared in the space before Ren Hao, and Han Li's figure emerged. With a flick of his sleeve, 9 azure flying swords appeared before him. Their light flared, then condensed, merging in an instant into a single giant azure sword, which came slashing down at Ren Hao's head. A world-shaking crash erupted. Ren Hao's body was hurled backward at even greater speed, smashing hard into one wall of the hall and making the entire structure tremble. He sprang back to his feet at once, his face filled with fear. A suit of blue battle armor had appeared on his body. It was made up of blue scales the size of copper coins. The helmet was shaped like a dragon's head, and dragon claw-like armor covered his arms and legs, making it seem as if the armor had been formed from the body of a giant blue dragon. The dragon head on the helmet flared at the nostrils as though breathing. Streams of dragon-shaped blue light flowed over the armor, radiating an incomparably immense draconic aura. Yet a slash mark had appeared on one shoulder, and the scales there had all shattered, clearly from Han Li's sword a moment earlier. That's the dragon form battle armor of the Holy Dragon Hall of the Black Earth Immortal Domain. Feng Lin cried out. Han Li was visibly surprised. Ever since arriving in the Black Earth Immortal Domain, he had been gathering all kinds of texts and cramming knowledge of the region. He had already developed a rough understanding of its major sects and powers. The Holy Dragon Hall was one of the great sects of the Black Earth Immortal Domain. Its founding patriarch had possessed true dragon blood, so the sect revered dragons and commanded enormous influence, enough to rank among the top 5 great powers. Han Li had never expected Ren Hao to come from the Holy Dragon Hall. Moreover, the Holy Dragon Hall excelled in forging battle armor and immortal treasures of exceptionally high quality, no worse than those of Hundred Creations Mountain. When Han Li had once discussed the art of refinement with Master Jingyang at Yuquan Tower, he had vaguely heard mention of this sect. Jingyang had spoken of it with great admiration. The armor on Ren Hao's body had astonishing defensive power. It had actually withstood Han Li's full-force sword strike. You think a single suit of armor will save your life? Delusional. Han Li laughed coldly, but did not immediately press forward. A clear cry sounded from within his body. The next moment, 9 differently colored spheres of light shot out from him. After a quick spin, they transformed into the phantasmal true spirit forms of a heavenly dragon, a true phoenix, a lightning rock, and the like. This time, however, there was one more than before, the phantom form of a gray 5-clawed dragon. It was the true spirit body of Chu Ling the Nightmare. One of the transformations in the 12 transformations of fright was precisely the Nightmare true spirit. After killing Chu Ling, Han Li had preserved the corpse. While crossing the savage wilds years ago, he had refined the Nightmare's true spirit blood and fused it into himself. Han Li formed seals with both hands and drew the true spirit phantoms into his body. At once, his entire body erupted with violet gold light too brilliant to look at directly. His form swelled wildly, becoming in an instant a violet gold demonic god with 3 heads and 6 arms. With a flick of his wrist, 9 crystalline threads of time law shot out and fused into the azure greatsword in his hand. The greatsword immediately began to tremble with a deep hum, and a row of golden runes appeared along its blade. The surrounding heaven and earth spiritual chi trembled, then transformed into countless 5-colored motes that poured toward the sword like a tide, causing its might to surge explosively. At the sight of this terrifying offensive power, all color drained from Ren Hao's face. He turned into a chain of blue afterimages and fled in another direction. At the same time, he swept out his sleeve, sending 8 or 9 immortal treasures of various colors shooting forth. In a blur, they transformed into a flood of treasure light that filled the entire hall and surged toward the violet gold demonic god, sealing off every gap ahead. Han Li merely smiled faintly and waved one demonic arm. With a soft burst, a great curtain of emerald radiance poured out and swept up all 8 or 9 immortal treasures at once. Caught within the emerald light, the treasure's spiritual radiance began to fade rapidly. In the blink of an eye, all of their treasure light vanished, leaving only the 8 or 9 differently shaped immortal treasures suspended motionless in midair, wrapped in green radiance like fish in a net. Han Li waved his arm again, and both the emerald radiance and the trapped treasures vanished in a flash. The entire sequence had taken no more than an instant. How is that possible? Ren Hao cried out in disbelief as he fled and glanced behind him. Han Li casually put away the treasures, and the demonic god he had become immediately stepped forward. Its enormous body merely blurred and vanished from where it stood. The next instant, it appeared again directly in front of Ren Hao, cutting off his escape route, and the azure greatsword in its hand came slashing down. Under the pressure of the temporal domain, Renhao was far too slow compared to Han Li. He had no chance of escaping. You go too far. Fine. I'll fight you to the death. A hint of despair showed in his eyes. With a furious roar, the blue greatsword in his hand blazed with sword light and rose to meet Han Li's strike, carrying the thunderous roar of surging seas. The two giant swords collided in midair. Crack! The blue greatsword, as fragile as paper, was sliced cleanly into two pieces by the azure greatsword. Without slowing in the slightest, the azure greatsword continued downward and struck Renhao's body with brutal force. Renhao's eyes bulged until the corners nearly split. He spat out a mouthful of essence blood, which fused into the armor over his body, while the immortal spiritual power inside him surged out in full and poured into the blue battle armor. The armor released towering blue light that condensed in a flash into a thick blue membrane, somewhat like Han Li's true extreme membrane, and interposed itself before the azure greatsword. But the greatsword's matchless sword light pulsed with terrifying sharpness, and within it lay wave after wave of powerful time law force. It still hacked forward at astonishing speed, soon piercing through the blue membrane and striking directly against the blue battle armor. The azure greatsword hummed and shook, pausing only very slightly before driving into the armor itself. No! You'll regret this. Renhao let out a despairing scream. Then his body exploded with a bang, turning into a rain of blood. The incomparably fierce sword chi of the azure bamboo cloud swarm swords had invaded his body and blown him apart from within. Not only his body, but even his nascent soul and spirit were shredded by the sword chi in an instant. Not even the tiniest trace remained. The blue battle armor also shattered completely along with him, breaking into thousands upon thousands of fragments. One of the demonic god's hands reached out and took a blue storage ring from what remained of Renhao's body. Then the violet gold light around Han Li flashed, his massive form shrank rapidly, and in the blink of an eye he returned to human shape. The azure greatsword also split back into 9 azure bamboo cloud swarm swords, and sank into his body. After witnessing the many divine abilities Han Li had revealed, Feng Lin's gaze shifted, and a trace of deep wariness appeared on his face. Han Li, however, did not even look at him. He turned his eyes instead toward the body of the big-headed child off to one side. Though the continuous fighting had not cost him too much, he had no wish to stir up another conflict. He had never intended to fight that woman for the flute in the first place. Most of his attention had already returned to the strange child with the oversized head. Because he knew the child's identity was unusual, he had kept part of his consciousness trained on the corpse even while battling the blue merfolk in Renhao. Yet he had noticed nothing out of the ordinary. After a brief moment of thought, Han Li extended one hand. A stream of azure light poured from his sleeve, wrapping gently around the child's corpse and pulling it slowly up out of the pool. Then, in that very instant, something unexpected happened. Without the slightest warning, the big-headed child's corpse suddenly accelerated, arriving before Han Li in an instant. Its massive head came so close that it nearly touched his forehead, and the tip of its nose almost struck his chin. Ordinarily, Han Li would never have reacted so slowly. But for some reason, the corpse's movement was extremely strange, as though it carried a certain power of the time laws that caught him completely off guard. Then the child's eyelids suddenly trembled and opened. A pair of translucent, water-blue eyes looked Han Li over twice. Then its mouth opened and spat out a burst of blue radiance directly at him. The blue light struck Han Li between the brows. In his sea of consciousness, it was as if a bolt of thunder had exploded, leaving his ears ringing non-stop. Before he could investigate what had changed in his mind, the child's mouth opened once more and spoke a single sentence. "Kill Kamozi." Then its eyes and mouth closed again. Immediately afterward, countless fine and densely packed blue lines of light lit up across the corpse. A series of cracking sounds like shattering porcelain rang out, and the body dissolved straight into a drifting stream of blue smoke that disappeared in the blink of an eye. Han Li suddenly came back to himself, his body giving an involuntary shudder, as though he had just awoken from a dream. Hundreds of feet away, Feng Lin's brows twitched slightly and puzzlement flashed through his eyes. All he had seen was Han Li bending down and seeming to space out for a brief instant. He had no idea what had happened, but when he lowered his eyes toward the pool again, He was startled to find that the big-headed child's corpse had vanished without his noticing when. At just that moment, the sound of splashing water suddenly rose from the pool. When Feng Lin looked over, he saw that a vortex about half a foot across had appeared in the center of the pool, spinning the entire mass of blue liquid as it drained rapidly downward. In only a moment the pool was almost dry. Hanli was right beside it. With swift hands and sharp eyes, he immediately reached down into the liquid. A huge azure hand appeared out of thin air and scooped up a mass of blue water from the bottom of the pool. But he had time for only that one scoop. The last of the liquid at the bottom drained away completely and vanished. Hanli let out a sigh. Flipping a hand, he brought out a white jade vial, poured the blue liquid, which might well be water of time, into it and stored it inside his bracelet. He glanced toward the bottom of the pool, and saw that it was densely inlaid with thousands upon thousands of blue pebbles the size of fists. Rich spiritual qi radiated from them. They were not objects of law, but they were still water attribute materials of excellent quality. Fellow Taoist Feng, there are still some water attribute materials in this palace. I think the two of us can simply divide them. There's no need to make a bigger conflict out of this, is there? Hanli said with a smile, looking toward the demonic young woman. That would naturally be for the best. Feng Lin lowered her gaze slightly, covering her mouth with a smile. Hanli said no more. He and the demonic woman each began collecting water attribute materials in the pool and throughout the palace. When they had finished, the two searched the entire three-story palace with great care. After finding nothing further, they finally emerged together. Fellow Taoist Feng, I plan to continue inward along this route. Will you come with me? Hanli asked, glancing toward the mist-covered area behind the palace. There's no need for us to travel together. I plan to return the way I came and take another look at that earlier passage. Feng Lin replied at once, fully aware of Hanli's intention. After seeing Hanli act twice, she had grown deeply wary of him. How could she dare walk the same road with him? Of course, that was precisely the outcome Hanli wanted. So he went along with it smoothly. In that case, I won't press the matter. Take care. Only after watching Feng Lin's alluring figure disappear into the passage did Hanli slowly let out a long breath. His expression sharpened, and his divine sense sank into his sea of consciousness for careful inspection. Inside all was calm. Only a mass of blue radiance floated there quietly, without the slightest fluctuation. The instant Hanli directed his consciousness toward it, the blue light burst apart with a soft sound and spread into a screen of blue light. Ripples like water shimmered across it, and from within emerged several thousand golden characters. After examining them, Hanli discovered with astonishment that they recorded all 9 volumes of the Water Evolution 4 Seasons art, 2 more levels than the version he had previously obtained from Azure Flow Palace in the northern cold immortal domain. At the end of the cultivation art, there was also a long section containing the big-headed child's own cultivation insights into the technique, more than 3,000 words in all. Once Hanli committed everything to memory, all the writing suddenly scattered into golden dust and dispersed together with the surrounding blue light. Hanli slowly opened his eyes, and a trace of joy flashed across them, though only for an instant. This was hardly the place to study his newly gained treasure in depth. After steadying himself, he moved again and continued on toward the back of the palace. Beyond the palace lay a sparse green mountain forest. Thin mist drifted through it, obstructing vision and suppressing divine sense, so Hanli had no choice but to slow down and proceed carefully. Fortunately, the journey remained uneventful. Aside from occasionally glimpsing the corpses of some True Word Gate disciples and a few Heavenly Court cultivators among the woods, he encountered no more buildings or ruins. About 3 hours later, the trees in the forest grew even sparser, but the mist ahead became much denser. When Hanli finally emerged from the woods, he found before him a vast lotus pond nearly 1,000 feet across. The leaves spread thick over the surface, lush and green as jade. Within the pond, creamy white mist surged and rolled. Pink-white lotus flowers were scattered all around, graceful and swaying, carrying a faint aura of immortal elegance. Unfortunately, Hanli had no leisure to appreciate such scenery. He intended only to skim over the pond and continue inward. But when he rose into the air and swept his gaze over the lotus pond below, his brows drew together slightly, and he came to a halt in midair. No wonder the vitality of heaven and earth is so dense here. This is actually rather interesting. Suspended in the air, Hanli observed the scene below for a while and discovered that the pink lotuses, though seemingly scattered at random, were in fact arranged according to a subtle order. Together they formed a large-scale formation. After a moment's thought, he dropped down abruptly. Just above the surface of the water, purple crystalline light flashed in his eyes as he swept his gaze in every direction. Under the sight of the 9 netherworld devil eyes, the distribution of the plants in the pond immediately became far clearer. At the sight, the corners of Han Li's mouth lifted into a faint smile. He waved a hand, and a patch of silver flame shot forth, transforming after a flicker into a silver firebird. With a beat of its wings, it became a streak of silver light that rapidly circled the lotus pond once, and great sheets of silver flame rained down over the entire pond like heavenly fire, igniting all the lotus leaves in an instant. Crackling sounds rang out from within the raging silver fire. The emerald lotus leaves were burned by the essence flame bird until they all turned to ash. All life vanished from the pond, leaving it deathly still. Yet even so, the creamy white mist suffusing the pond did not disperse, and the pink lotuses did not disappear either. Hanli nodded inwardly at the sight and raised a hand in a gentle beckoning motion. A clear cry came from within the pond. All the silver flames reversed direction and flew back, once more becoming a silver flame bird that streaked toward Hanli. As it neared him, it suddenly shrank into a little silver flame child, which hopped onto his shoulder. The little silver flame figure looked around with a puzzled expression, seemingly unable to understand why Hanli had ordered it to burn the entire pond of lotuses, yet not allowed it to finish the job. It seemed that given just a little more time, even the pink lotuses would have been reduced to ash. While it was still perplexed, a new change suddenly appeared within the pond. Tiny points of green crystalline light lit up around the pink lotuses one after another. Soon tender shoots emerged from them, while the creamy mist all around began to churn violently. Before long, fresh green leaves unfurled visibly from those shoots and continued to grow larger. In the span of moments, the entire pond was once more filled with lush emerald lotus leaves. These were no illusionary phantoms. The water attribute spiritual energy within the pond was simply so abundant, and aided by the formation, that the leaves could regrow in an instant. At the sight, the little silver flame figure widened its eyes in outrage, apparently offended that the pond dared regenerate under its silver fire. Its flames surged at once as it prepared to dive down and burn everything to absolute cinders. Hanli merely raised a hand and patted the little figure on the head, signaling that it need not do so. Only then did the little figure subdue its flames and return to his body. Hanli looked slowly around, his gaze flickering. After his earlier probing, he had already figured out the layout of the lotus pond. He swept sideways several hundred feet and arrived before one of the pink lotuses. Raising a hand, he thrust it straight down beneath the flower. As he pulled upward, a giant azure hand appeared from thin air. Its 5 fingers closed, uprooting the pink lotus completely. At its roots, blue crystalline light shone brilliantly, and hanging there was a crystal-clear blue lotus. The moment the blue crystal lotus left the water, all the other pink lotuses in the pond began to wither and collapse. The lotus leaves remained standing tall for the moment and did not immediately dry up, but they had lost their former jade luster and seemed to have lost their life as well. At the same time, the creamy mist that had shrouded the pond all this while began to disperse bit by bit in the faint breeze. Hanli paid no attention to the changes in the pond. His gaze was fixed on the blue crystal lotus in his hands. Feeling the intense aura of water attribute law power emanating from it, a smile curved his lips. With a faint gleam of light in 2 fingers of his right hand, a silver light gate about 10 feet tall appeared before him. He stepped through it and arrived at once beside the golden lotus pond outside the bamboo pavilion within the flower branch grotto heaven. With a flick of his hand, he tossed the blue crystal lotus and the pink lotus connected to it into the pond. The blue crystal lotus took root the moment it touched the ground. Very soon, 6 pink lotuses emerged in the not-so-large pond, while water vapor rose all around. A faint white mist began drifting upward from the surface of the water. Within the grotto heaven itself, a fresh breeze seemed to arise and carried the pale mist throughout the entire small world, causing the spiritual chi of the whole flower branch grotto heaven to surge once more. On the second floor of the bamboo building, Mo Guang had been cultivating with closed eyes. The sudden change in spiritual qi disturbed him, and he opened his eyes abruptly. But after briefly examining the change in the grotto heaven and glancing once toward Han Li's location, he simply closed his eyes again, unperturbed. Over by the spirit herb garden, on the balcony of a newly built bamboo loft, Dao Xie stood leaning on the rail and looking this way, astonishment flickering in his eyes. Han Li hovered in midair with his hands behind his back, a faint smile at the corners of his mouth, letting the breeze wash over him as his robes fluttered loudly. After a long while, seeing that nothing unusual occurred, he nodded in satisfaction. With this thing, together with the golden lotus and the formation from before, the circulation of spiritual qi within the grotto heaven would become far more lively, greatly reducing the consumption of mid-grade immortal essence stones. With that thought in mind, he stepped out of the flower branch grotto heaven, rose into the air, flew over the 1,000-foot lotus pond, and continued deeper inward. At the same time, somewhere else within the True Word Gate ruins, there lay a dense cluster of ruined buildings. The place was a scene of utter devastation. Collapsed palace walls and broken beams lay everywhere, mixed among the bones and remains of great numbers of True Word Gate disciples and Heavenly Court cultivators. Some had clearly been powerful in life, for despite having lain dead for untold ages, their bones still shone with a faint glossy luster. And at the center of these ruins, one enormous palace still remained relatively intact. Its shape was extremely strange, like a mass of crimson flame frozen in place. Above its entrance hung a huge plaque with 3 vertical characters: Flowing Fire Palace. Whether because of the material from which it had been built, or because furnaces for alchemy or refinement still remained within, waves of heat still rolled from its walls even now. One after another they spread outward, distorting and blurring the surrounding air. And at this very moment, thunderous sounds were constantly erupting before the main gate. A violet domain overlapped with a yellow one, and within them a voluptuous woman in a purple palace dress, her figure lush and full, was fighting fiercely against an old man with a sallow face and a hunched, consumptive look. The seductive woman was none other than Yan Xian, city lord of Illusory Smoke City. At that moment her eyes and brows were filled with fury. The red mole between her brows had been pushed high by her tightly knit frown. Held in her arms was a purple jade pipa, whose strings she plucked at blinding speed. A sharp chorus of metallic notes rang out. Along with the sound, one exquisite beauty after another condensed from illusory smoke, each holding a curved purple saber. Their swaying figures swept forward through the air, slashing toward the sickly old ghost. The old ghost darted back and forth across the square before the hall, easily dodging the assaults of the smoke-formed women. Because his cultivation far surpassed hers, there was not the slightest fear on his face. Instead, it was full of mockery and relish, as though he rather enjoyed being surrounded by such a flock of illusory beauties. His somewhat cloudy eyes rolled shamelessly over Yan Xian's chest and hips, and with a lewd smile at the corner of his mouth, he chuckled. "Heh heh, City Lord Xian in these desolate ruins, with only the 2 of us here, 1 man and 1 woman. Wouldn't doing something a little more romantic be far more interesting than all this killing and fighting? You know who I am?" Yan Xian asked in a low voice. "Aren't you Palace Master Fu's little lover? What's so hard to know about that? What, in these True Word Gate ruins, do you still think you can use Fu Yuanhai's name to pressure me?" The sickly old ghost said with a careless grin. "You filthy thing, good for nothing but flapping your mouth. If you really have guts, then strip off that layer of the Yipao Society and face me with your true appearance. I swear that once we're out of the True Word Gate ruins, I'll call up that lover of mine and pay a visit to your ancestors for 18 generations. Yan Xian spat coldly. Though she spoke with such force, she did not dare underestimate him in the slightest. His cultivation was simply far too much higher than hers. If he had not been toying with her the whole time, she would never have managed to hold out this long without injury. Cough. Since the beauty requests it, how could I possibly refuse? The sickly old ghost suddenly straightened his back, gave an affected little cough and laughed. Then he reached behind his neck, seized the collar of his clothes, and yanked it sharply forward. To Yan Xian's astonishment, he tore away not only his clothes but also a full layer of human skin, as if performing a magic trick, and stepped out from within as a handsome young man dressed in white. "Well?" "Is this appearance of mine worthy of milady's eye?" he asked. His face and figure had become entirely different, and even the way he spoke had changed completely. Compared with the sickly old ghost from before, he was like a different person altogether. A strange light flashed through Yanxian's eyes as she realized that there truly no longer seemed to be any disguise upon him. It was as though he was genuinely facing her in his real form, and her expression changed at once as a dreadful feeling rose in her heart. That meant he was certain his true face would never be spread abroad, and that also meant he intended to kill her. Seeing the change in her expression and her sudden silence, the transformed young man in white ran a scarlet tongue over his lips and laughed openly. "Don't worry. Such a stunningly beautiful woman. I would never bear to kill you outright. Naturally, I'll turn you into a human curio and preserve you properly." At those words, a chill ran through Yanxian from head to toe. She clutched the purple jade pipa tightly, drew back its strings as if drawing a bow, and suddenly snapped them forward at the man in white. A heavy hum rang out. A beam of purple light burst from the pipa and transformed into an enormous purple-winged bat. Letting out shrill cries, it shot forward. Within Yanxian's violet domain, the waves of sound released by the bat's screech, so fine they were nearly impossible to see with the naked eye, swelled layer upon layer, multiplying as they rolled forward and crushed toward the space ahead. Faced with Yanxian's new wave of ferocious attacks, the young lord in white merely smiled. Then, with a sudden lift of his hand, he struck out a string of incantation seals. They flashed once and vanished into the surrounding void. In the next instant, within the yellow spiritual domain he had unleashed, clusters of radiant discs the size of cartwheels appeared, spinning ceaselessly as they weakened the sonic assault sent forth by the purple-winged bat. Even so, the high-grade white robe he wore began to crease in layer upon layer. After holding out for a few moments, a series of ripping sounds rang out. Countless tiny tears split open across his robe, while the discs of light finally began to collapse one after another. At the same time, the palace ruins beside and behind him trembled violently beneath the force of the sound waves. Before long they were reduced to dust, drifting into the air like smoke and scattering in every direction. Seeing this, Yanxian felt a flicker of delight in her eyes. She immediately began chanting under her breath, her hands moving swiftly across the pipa. A savage glint flashed through the purple-winged bat's eyes. With a violent spread of its wings, it became a streak of violet light and shot toward the young lord in white. "So you refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit? Then don't blame me for showing no mercy," the young lord in white snapped, lowering his gaze to glance at his badly shredded clothing, anger flashing in his eyes. As he spoke, he turned his wrist. A flash of spiritual light flared before him, and at once a gigantic iron fan over 6 feet long appeared. Rings of intricate yellow runes were inscribed across its surface, radiating a dense aura of earth-attributed law power. With a one-handed incantation, the iron fan let out a clang and snapped open. Upon its vast surface, the image of a yellow-furred strange beast resembling a wind-howl creature blazed with light. It seemed to come alive as it leaped out from the fan, opened its huge maw, and released a tornado hurricane wrapped in rolling yellow sand. A thunderous roar erupted. The sandstorm tornado swept past and instantly pulverized the purple-winged bat, just as it had rushed close enough to strike. Yanxian, still clutching her pipa, felt her entire body grow sluggish and heavy, utterly unable to evade. The yellow sand tornado smashed into her, sending her flying backward. With a loud crash, she slammed into the gates of the Hall of Flowing Fire and tumbled inside. "TSK, I hit too hard. I hope I didn't ruin that pretty face," the young lord in white muttered with a pained cry, hurriedly putting away the iron fan as he rushed forward in concern. But before he could reach the gate, a faint yet densely packed buzzing suddenly rose by his ears, as though countless beetles were beating their wings at once. Immediately afterward, Yanxian's alarmed scream burst from within the hall. "No! What is this?" Before her voice had even faded, her figure exploded out of the hall. She shot 100 feet into the air, then plummeted heavily back down and slammed into the ground with a dull thud. The young lord in white froze for a moment at the sight, then narrowed his eyes and looked closely at her body. At once he sucked in a cold breath. A vast swarm of dark red insects no bigger than grains of rice had covered her from head to toe. Tiny red flames flickered over their bodies as they crawled densely across every inch of her. She rolled madly on the ground, her face twisted in agony, a hoarse moan constantly escaping her lips. Under the burning of the flames, a faint golden mist shrouded her body. Her once radiant face began to sprout fine wrinkles at a speed visible to the naked eye, while streaks of white started to appear among the dark hair at her temples. What in the world were these things? They seemed capable of burning away her vital essence. Even golden immortal cultivators, though they could not escape the coming of decay tribulations, possessed lifespans that were otherwise nearly endless. Yet these bizarre little creatures appeared to have the heaven-defying ability to consume that very longevity. The young lord in white's face turned ghastly pale. Shock and terror surged through him. He spun around, ready to flee at any cost. But at that very moment, another sudden change erupted. A massive figure descended from the sky like an iron tower crashing down. At once, a crimson spiritual domain spread out and blanketed the surrounding wilderness, trapping him within it as well. The young lord in white turned his head to look. He saw a man with a strange visage, flames for hair, a nose like a rhinoceros horn, and two huge golden rings hanging from his pointed ears. His expression was cold, his eyes filled with disdain. This fire-haired member of another race was none other than Qi-Rong. The instant the young lord in white sensed the powerful aura Qi-Rong was deliberately releasing, half his heart turned cold. This was clearly a late-stage Tai cultivator. A mere golden immortal dares lay hands on the fire-year glowworms my master keeps? Let me see just how long your lifespan can feed them, Qi-Rong said with a cold laugh. What? Such a thing really exists. At the words fire-year glowworms, the young lord in white went rigid. Only then did he recall a rumor that had long circulated through the Immortal Realm. The legendary fire-year glowworms were an extremely peculiar species of spirit insect. Though they resembled ordinary fireflies from the mortal world, the flames burning on their bodies contained a strange power of time laws. Whenever they encountered living flesh and blood, they could ignite and consume its lifespan, using that energy to reproduce. Wherever they passed, life was often wiped out, and their ferocity was infamous. Yet because their own lifespans were pitifully short, lasting only about a month, they could not continue reproducing indefinitely unless there were living beings for them to burn. Without that, they would eventually die out. For that reason, they were not commonly found in the world. However, it was said that certain cultivators skilled in the art of insect control could preserve them for long periods by sealing them within temporal treasures or special restrictions, only releasing them when needed. Clearly, the Hall of Flowing Fire had once contained such a restriction. The battle between him and Yin Xian had shattered it, unleashing these creatures. Cold sweat broke out across the young lord in white's back. Just as he was frantically thinking of a way to escape, he saw the alien man's gaze shift and lock onto him. Knowing things had turned dire, he dared not hesitate any longer. His hands flew into an incantation, yellow light flaring all around him. A yellow-brown vortex instantly appeared beneath his feet, and with a single spin it swallowed him up, making him vanish underground. Yet only a few breaths later, a yellow-brown glow lit up the earth several hundred feet away. The young lord in white was dragged back out of the ground, clamped tightly by a giant flaming hand that had extended down from the red spiritual domain above. Qi-Rong chuckled. Since you came, don't think of leaving. He raised a hand and slammed it heavily toward the ground. The flaming hand pinned the young lord in white flat against the earth. Then Qi-Rong calmly drew from his robes a short flute of dark red color, mottled with black spots, looking for all the world like an old battered fire-blowing tube. But when he pressed its holes and began to play, an ancient desolate sound drifted out from it. As the music spread, the buzzing from within the Hall of Flowing Fire grew louder and louder. Thousands upon thousands of fire-year glowworms awakened from their frozen state, beat their wings and flew out, swarming toward the young lord in white. In an instant, agonized screams once again rang across the sky. Qi-Rong did not spare another glance for either the young lord in white or Yin Xian. Instead, he strode toward the other side of the plaza. There stood a statue of an alien race, still relatively intact and bearing few signs of damage. Its hands and feet were broad as fans, its hair atop its head rose like flames, and its upper body was bare. Strange circular patterns were inscribed across its skin. Qi Rong walked before the statue, bowed solemnly and murmured, "This disciple acted on his own and came here to collect the fire-year glowworms. I beg Master not to blame me. Those who trespassed into my hall of flowing fire have already been executed." More than 10 days later, above a stretch of mountain forest within the ruins of the True Word sect, a figure in green drove a jade-green flying carriage through the sky. His face was pale, his features utterly ordinary. It was Han Li, disguised under the identity of Li Jianglu. During these past days, he had continued onward beyond that enormous pond. Along the way he had found only scattered, damaged ruins. He had encountered no further danger, nor had he found any more treasures. Thus he had arrived here in relative peace. Standing upon the flying carriage, he gazed into the distance. Suddenly his brow furrowed. With a change in the hand seals, he guided the carriage down toward the ground. After landing, Han Li put the carriage away and followed a stone-paved path through the forest. Before long, he arrived at a gigantic suspended arch bridge. The bridge was constructed of both wood and stone, more than 30 yards wide. It had green stone steps as well as a flat roadway. At either end stood a gray-white stone lion, serving as the guardian spirit beasts of the bridge. Han Li stepped forward and raised a hand to touch one of the lions, which was much taller than he was. He quickly confirmed that it was nothing more than an ordinary guardian stone beast, with not the slightest fluctuation of spiritual power. His eyes narrowed slightly. After a brief hesitation, he slowly climbed the steps and walked toward the bridge, one step at a time. But when he neared the middle of the arch, his footsteps abruptly stopped. The bridge ended there. Beyond that point stretched a spatial rift thousands of feet long, black as pitch and utterly without light, from which wave after wave of intense spatial fluctuations surged forth. The other half of the bridge seemed to have been swallowed entirely by that spatial crack. Besides that enormous rift, countless smaller spatial fissures were scattered densely throughout the surrounding area. Though they did not completely block Han Li's path, he did not dare try to pass through them recklessly. Han Li narrowed his eyes and stared into the blackness of the rift. Yet all he saw was emptiness. There was nothing inside at all. If he looked too long, he even began to feel as though he might be swallowed into it. Slowly, he withdrew his gaze and looked to either side of the bridge. On both sides for thousands of feet the landscape was much the same. Towering ancient trees, pavilions, and terraces had all been sliced neatly in half. Some still stood stubbornly like this half-bridge, while others had already collapsed entirely into ruin. Everything about it felt deeply eerie. "So the way forward is blocked," Han Li murmured to himself, eyes narrowing. With that, he turned and began walking back down the bridge. But the moment he lifted his foot, the remaining half of the bridge gave a violent tremor and began to shake continuously. Han Li whirled around and saw that the enormous black fissure behind him was releasing increasingly terrifying spatial fluctuations. Its edges were slowly expanding, like the maw of some heaven-swallowing beast devouring its way toward the bridge. His heart tightened. He immediately pushed off with the tip of his foot and darted away, landing beside one of the stone lions at the bridgehead. Yet when he turned around again, the strange disturbance had already ceased. The expanded fissure had apparently stabilized once more. Could it be that the ruins of the True Word sect are still undergoing continual spatial collapse? Han Li pondered inwardly. If that were true, then from here on, he would have to be even more careful while searching through the ruins. At that very moment, another sudden change occurred. A strange fluctuation arose beneath the stone lion beside him. Then a black vortex more than 30 feet across suddenly appeared from nowhere and began expanding without pause, releasing a terrifying force of attraction. Han Li's instincts flared. He immediately circulated the mantra treasure wheel within his body, intending to escape the area. But he discovered that his feet had already been locked in place by a powerful spatial force, and he could not break free. "This is bad." His expression changed sharply. He immediately expanded his time-spirit domain. Purple-gold light flashed across his body, golden scales appearing on his skin, while a dark green suit of armor formed from the Xuanwu bloodline covered him. Yet before he could summon the azure bamboo cloud-swarm swords, the pulling force beneath him suddenly surged. In an instant, both he and the stone lion were dragged into the vortex. In the blink of an eye, Han Li felt empty air under his feet, and his figure appeared within a dim gray-black space. A thunderous boom rang out. The stone lion that had fallen into the spatial fissure along with Han Li was swept by a cyclone shrouded in hazy gray light. It shattered instantly into powder and vanished without a trace. Han Li knew he had been dragged into a spatial fissure, and did not dare relax even slightly. Purple light flickered in his eyes as he carefully surveyed his surroundings. At the same time he flipped both hands. In one he held the fused azure bamboo cloudswarm sword, formed from 9 blades as one, and in the other the emerald profound heavenly gourd, remaining on full alert. A howling wind rose endlessly from all directions. As far as the eye could see, clusters of gray-white spatial vortices and long and short gray-white spatial fissures were scattered chaotically across the region, looking wildly unstable. Far off in the void, patches of land of various sizes floated in the distance, each wrapped in an invisible transparent bubble, suspended amid the cracks and vortices. Some of the larger pieces of land seemed comparatively stable. Others, the smaller ones, were visibly disintegrating under the squeezing and tearing of the surrounding spatial fissures. Then suddenly, from an extremely distant point in the void, a deafening roar erupted. Han Li's heart clenched. He quickly turned and looked, only to see an enormous gray-white whirlpool tearing through the surrounding space and sweeping madly in this direction. Everywhere it passed, space convulsed violently. Intense spatial fluctuations twisted even the surrounding darkness. Nearby fissures could no longer maintain themselves and were dragged into the whirlpool. This is bad. A spatial storm. Han Li could only curse inwardly. Being dragged inexplicably into a spatial fissure had already been miserable enough, and now he had run straight into a spatial storm as well. Though his physical body was now extremely powerful, he still did not dare confront that degree of spatial force head-on. His gaze shifted to the nearest patch of floating land. He dared not linger any longer. Gritting his teeth, he secretly reversed the mantra treasure wheel within his body, and his figure began moving toward it. Because there were simply too many spatial fissures all around, Han Li dared not increase his speed too much. He could only move with the utmost caution, inching forward through the void. After flying for about 1,000 feet, Han Li paused briefly and glanced back at the spatial storm. His expression immediately turned extremely ugly. The gray-white whirlpool, which had been no more than 10,000 feet across just moments ago, had now swollen to tens of thousands of feet. Though it was not moving directly toward him, as it kept expanding, its effect on this already unstable space would only become greater and greater. If he could not reach the land ahead before the storm's influence reached him, then he could do nothing but watch helplessly as he and the surrounding space were dragged into the whirlpool little by little and ground to pieces. If he died here, not only would his body vanish without a trace, even his nascent soul and spirit would be completely scattered by the spatial winds. No time to worry about anything else now, Han Li muttered inwardly. The spiritual domain around him expanded several times over, and his speed suddenly surged. He became a streak of golden light, darting swiftly through the void. Tens of thousands of feet. Thousands of feet. A little over 1,000. The floating land drew closer and closer. Its landscape magnified rapidly before his eyes. Han Li could even catch the scent of grass and trees upon it. The heart hanging in his throat climbed still higher. Just a little more. Just a little more. But just as he was about to reach the edge of the land, a tremendous explosion suddenly rang out. The vast spatial storm burst apart. At its heart, a dazzling white light flared, and countless gray-white blades of light shot outward in all directions. These gray-white blades varied in size. Some were hundreds of feet long, while others were only inches across. Yet each one was wrapped in violent, primordial spatial force, and their power was impossible to predict. Sensing the upheaval behind him, Han Li's expression darkened even further. He had no time to turn around. He could only accelerate frantically and charge straight toward the land ahead. At that moment, a violent fluctuation of space erupted behind him. Bang bang bang. Han Li's heart jolted. Before he could react, several explosions rang out behind him. Several gray-white blades of light struck his time-spirit domain. It had no chance to exert any slowing effect before the spatial force twisted and tore it apart, causing it to collapse on its own. With a shout, Han Li threw himself forward desperately, plunging toward the floating land. A heavy boom exploded. His body slammed into an invisible spatial barrier, impossible to see with the naked eye yet solid beyond belief. Not only did he fail to pass through, he was thrown violently backward. Hanli let out a muffled groan. Before he could rush toward the land again, it was already too late. A gray-white blade of light about 3 feet long had reached him, stabbing straight toward the center of his back. At the critical moment, Hanli had no time to think. He threw the profound heavenly gourd behind him with one hand, while his other hand rapidly formed seals. The emerald gourd burst with light. A vortex appeared at its mouth, and with a soft pop it swallowed the gray-white blade into the gourd. Hanli gripped the gourd and felt a massive impact slam into him, nearly wrenching it from his hand. Now that he had gained even the briefest respite, how could he waste it? His figure accelerated once more and shot again toward the floating land. But just then, a searing pain suddenly flared in his palm. Looking down, he saw that the emerald gourd in his hand had turned red-hot, like a lump of iron taken from the forge. It trembled violently, as though it might explode at any moment. A thought flashed through Hanli's mind. He put away the azure bamboo cloudswarm sword, then lifted one hand and struck the bottom of the profound heavenly gourd with force. A light pop sounded, and the gray-white blade that had been absorbed into the gourd shot back out, blasting straight toward the spatial barrier surrounding the land. A heaven-shaking boom followed. In the space outside the land, a narrow gap appeared, like a slit torn in space itself. It was only a few yards long and wildly unstable, seeming liable to vanish at any moment. Hanli did not dare miss this chance. The mantra treasure wheel within him reversed to its limit. His figure flashed and shot into the opening. The next instant he fell like a meteor toward the ground below. With a heavy crash he smashed into the summit of a tall mountain, shattering rock and sending clouds of dust billowing skyward. But immediately afterward, with a sharp whoosh, Hanli shot back out of the impact crater. Hovering in midair, he looked up at the slit in the sky as it slowly closed. He let out a long breath, fear lingering in his heart. What had just happened had been far too close. If his reaction had been even the slightest bit slower, or if not for the profound heavenly gourd, he would have been in grave trouble. It seemed that these seemingly tranquil ruins of the True Word sect were still filled with hidden dangers. He really had been too careless before. A moment later, he slowly descended and came to rest beneath a patch of dense green shade, sitting down against a jagged, grotesque boulder. He lifted the profound heavenly gourd in his hand. His palm still felt warm, but the burning pain was gone. The crimson glow covering the gourd was also fading, gradually returning to its original emerald color. After examining it briefly, Hanli sent his spiritual sense into the gourd and inspected it carefully for a while. Aside from somewhat chaotic spiritual power circulation inside, none of the immortal artifacts within, including the azure bamboo cloudswarm sword, had suffered any real damage. Only then did he relax a little. He put the gourd away, took out a medicinal pill, swallowed it, and closed his eyes to regulate his breathing. About half an hour later, his eyes opened once more, and the aura around him had finally steadied. Rising to his feet, Hanli stretched his body and began surveying the area. He soon noticed that the surrounding mountain forest was filled with grotesque, towering stones that stretched all the way beyond the woodland. Where is this place? Could it also be somewhere within the ruins? With that question in mind, Hanli followed the strange stones outward. After leaving the dense forest, he felt the world around him suddenly open up. He swept his gaze around and continued onward. Before long, he reached a vast stone forest formed of all kinds of jagged, fantastically shaped rocks. At the center of the stone forest stood a circular stone platform about 1,000 feet across and 100 feet high. It was entirely blue-gray and seemed to merge seamlessly with the mountain below. Crisscrossed with cracks and covered in moss, it looked ancient indeed. Seeing it, Hanli's brow furrowed slightly. The high platform before him seemed strangely familiar. After a moment's thought, he suddenly leaped into the air and landed atop the platform. There was little placed upon it. The ground was covered with turtle shell-like cracks, from which many green vines stretched out, twisting and covering the floor. But what was most unusual was that the entire platform seemed to be suffused with a faint layer of time law power. Not far away at the edge of the platform, stood a giant stone stele over 100 feet tall. It too was covered with moss and wrapped in green vines. When Hanli approached, he discovered that beneath the vines were several large dark gold characters inscribed in ancient script. Words speak of heaven and earth. Hanli frowned deeply. Then he looked back around him. The mountain was surrounded by a vast, boundless sea of clouds. At once realization dawned on him. So it was here. This stone platform was precisely the place he had once seen through the crystal wall, where the big-eared monk, the patriarch Miro, had instructed his disciples. Back then, merely hearing 8.5 sentences of the patriarch's unfathomably profound sermon had caused Hanli's divine abilities to operate on their own. He had even opened 8 immortal apertures in one breath, gaining immeasurable benefits. Unfortunately, since that time he had never again had the chance to witness that scene through the crystal wall. Yet now, by a strange twist of fate, he had returned here once more. Perhaps it was truly the arrangement of heaven, giving him another chance to recreate the scene of Patriarch Miro's sermon. With that thought, Hanli immediately formed a seal with both hands. Golden light blazed behind him, and the mantra treasure wheel slowly emerged, spinning in the air. The next moment, his body flashed upward into the sky, where he stood suspended in midair. Back then, limited by the crystal wall, he had not been able to take in the entire platform. Today, naturally, he intended to choose the best vantage point. His hand seals shifted and he quietly intoned, "Condense." The moment the word left his lips, hundreds of time-inscribed Tao patterns on the mantra treasure wheel behind him lit up all at once. The eye of truth suspended at its center flew open, revealing a great golden eyeball like molten liquid metal. It spun once, then projected a sheet of golden radiance down onto the stone platform. Bathed in the golden light, the blue stone platform itself began to emit a faint golden glow. Interweaving in the void, the light formed layers of phantom images, and one familiar figure after another emerged within them. As expected, Hanli murmured to himself. His gaze moved from the yellow-robed man called Mu Yan, the wooden being with straw-like hair, to the 5-foot-tall big-headed child he had seen before in the waterborne palace, and then to the bare-chested man covered in flame patterns. Finally, his eyes settled on the plump monk in red kasaya robes with the large ears. The monk's gaze was gentle. He sat cross-legged with casual ease, lightly rolling a string of jade prayer beads between his fingers, his lips moving slowly as he lectured in an unhurried voice. Each time he opened his mouth, strings of 5-colored runes flew from between his lips, transforming into streams of multicolored light that rose into the heavens. In turn, they caused heaven and earth to resonate, producing countless wondrous phenomena. Even though this was the second time Hanli had seen such a scene, awe still filled his heart. Yet unlike the first time, the spectacle before him was only an insubstantial phantom reconstructed by the eye of truth. It was not happening in real time, and so it lacked the mysterious profundity he had felt before. From beginning to end, nothing unusual occurred within Hanli himself. As he watched winds rise in the sky, clouds churn, snow fall, and frost form in wave after wave of extraordinary transformations, his doubts only deepened. With a supreme figure like Patriarch Miro in the True Word sect, one who possessed such peerless and wondrous methods, how could the sect still have been destroyed? Just how powerful, then, must the Time Tao ancestor who annihilated it have been? Hanli could not even imagine it. A while later, the yellow-robed tree being began asking questions, and the big-eared monk answered with a smile, resolving his doubts. The 5 disciples one after another bowed in reverence. The monk continued preaching. But halfway through he suddenly stopped, letting out a sound of surprise as he turned his gaze toward a certain point in the void. Hanli immediately looked there as well, but saw only empty air. As he was wondering what was happening, the other 5 disciples also woke from the rapt state they had fallen into and looked in that direction. Among them, the yellow-robed tree being named Mu Yan even stood up and shouted angrily. Only then did Hanli come to a sudden realization. Was this not the very scene from back then, when he had been discovered eavesdropping on the sermon? He gave a bitter smile. But as his gaze turned back toward Patriarch Miro, the corner of his eye caught sight of something beside Mu Yan's meditation cushion. There, standing upright on 2 feet, was a glossy, plump old mouse, staring in the same direction. A mouse? That look? Could it be? Han Li's heart stirred. Instinctively, he thought of the giant green rat he had once seen in the abyss of the savage wilderness realm. Aside from the enormous difference in size, it looked exactly the same. While he was still puzzled, the yellow-robed tree being had already returned to his place and flicked the plump mouse lightly on the head. The creature was immediately sent rolling hundreds of feet away. Yet as soon as it got back on its feet, it scampered toward Patriarch Moreau and sat down against the edge of his robe like a person sitting cross-legged. Patriarch Moreau lowered his eyes and glanced at it, but did not drive it away. He simply continued his sermon. Seeing this, the yellow-robed tree being did not trouble the mouse any further. Though Han Li could no longer gain the sort of direct benefit he once had, he still watched with total concentration as Patriarch Moreau explained the Tao and answered the doubts of his disciples, carefully committing every gesture and movement of both master and disciples to memory. Who knew how much time passed? At the end of the sermon, Patriarch Moreau revealed a gentle smile. His gaze swept over all his disciples one by one, and with a wave of his hand he dismissed them, instructing them to go into seclusion and contemplate the Tao on their own. Han Li stared at Patriarch Moreau, astonishment rising in his heart. Just now, in a fleeting daze, he had felt as though the Patriarch's gaze had lingered on his own face for an instant. It had lasted only a moment, but the feeling was strangely subtle, as if some deeper meaning had been hidden within that look. Could it be that he had not only discovered the Han Li who had once eavesdropped on the sermon, but had also noticed the Han Li of the present, recreating this scene, and wished to say something to him? After thinking it over, Han Li decided that such a thing was too unlikely. He could only shake his head with a wry smile at his own wandering thoughts. After all the disciples had left, along with the plump mouse, each offering a deep bow, Patriarch Moreau still did not rise. He remained seated cross-legged in silence for a long while. Only then did he put away the prayer beads and slowly stand. His exaggeratedly stout body turned little by little until he faced the stone wall carved with the words speak of heaven and earth. He gazed at it quietly for a moment, then suddenly lifted a hand and pointed two fingers toward it. A streak of golden light shot from his fingertips and vanished into the character for word. After that, the big-eared monk stood with his hands behind his back, head raised toward the heavens. His figure gradually blurred, seeming to dissolve into the world around him until he disappeared entirely. For some reason, as Han Li watched his back, an overwhelming loneliness rose suddenly in his heart, a feeling that in the vastness of heaven and earth, a life was but a mustard seed. He remained lost in thought for a long time. Only after all the wondrous signs had vanished completely did Han Li form a seal and retract the mantra treasure wheel. Then he dropped straight down to the steel. With a sweep of his sleeve, a soft gust of wind rolled across the surface of the monument, clearing away the moss and vines to reveal the great character word in the center. Then a purple light flashed within Han Li's eyes as he activated his 9 netherworld demonic pupils and examined it closely. At the very top of the character, there truly was a layer of hazy golden light flickering, and within it something else seemed to be hidden. Han Li extended one hand. Holding his index and middle finger together like a blade, he thrust them inward. They pierced easily into the stone wall, and his fingers drew out a jade bamboo slip. He held the jade slip in his palm and looked down. In ancient gold script, a line of small golden characters was inscribed upon it. To hear the Tao at dawn and dusk, to find affinity with the laws of heaven and earth. Han Li's thoughts stirred. He refined the jade slip with immortal spiritual power and sent his spiritual sense into it, closing his eyes to inspect its contents. A moment later his eyes flew open, filled with undisguised delight. Recorded in the bamboo slip were the 9th layer cultivation method of the mantra wheel canon, and a strange section of text titled the Sumeru Resonance chapter. Han Li was naturally no stranger to the mantra wheel canon. After quickly reviewing it, he found that certain passages differed slightly from the version he had learned over the years. Perhaps the discrepancies were only matters of expression. Fortunately, they were minor and would not affect cultivation, much less cause any deviation or chi deviation. Moreover, within the 9-layer method, Han Li also found a detailed account of the divine ability words speak of heaven and earth, which he had previously obtained from Mu Yan. Here too there were slight differences but nothing of consequence. As for the Sumeru Resonance chapter, Hanli could make no sense of it at all. Though it contained only a few thousand words, the contents were obscure and difficult to comprehend. It resembled neither a cultivation method nor a secret divine technique. After examining it for a long time, he still could not determine what it was and could only give up for the moment. He carefully reviewed the complete 9-layer mantra wheel canon once more, suppressing the joy in his heart and the urge to begin cultivating it on the spot. Then he descended from the platform and landed once again before the stele. Hanli gazed deeply at the words speak of heaven and earth upon the stone monument. Then toward the figure that had long since vanished, he offered a solemn, respectful bow. Afterward, his body rose lightly into the air, and he flew swiftly down the mountain.